Okay, as we've been doing the last several months, we're going to spend the first few minutes having any new members introduce themselves. And if there are any beginners' questions, this is the time of the meeting when we try to answer those questions. So are there any folks? I know Matthew just introduced himself to the group. Any others, new members that want to say hello? All right. Welcome, Matt.
I have a question that you guys can answer
Please.
probably right away.
If it's a beginner question,
Yeah, in a way, I live in a Bortle 10 zone, as you know.
That's
And
special just for you, right?
well, is it is it a waste of time for me to try to take pictures of the comet with my camera?
probably
Uh,
not.
there's so much light pollution. Uh,
I mean, can you get to a spot where you've got a decent view of the west that's a
yes,
little away from the worst of the lights?
yes. There's a Bortle 1 zone, but I got to drive about 30 miles, and I don't really want to do that. Um, I'm purchasing I forget what it's called, one of these digital timer attachments to my DSLR where you can
Right.
adjust the exposure and all that. And but that's coming from Amazon in a couple days. But I may in a way I've got a bad case of been there and done that. When Hale Bopp came around, that was one of the first pictures of comets that I took, and they were really good. It was on film, but here what's keeping me from being too anxious to go out and do this? Everybody else is taking marvelous, incredible photographs already. And no matter what I do, it's not going to match
So what?
the quality of my goodness. David Eicher, he published a photo on Facebook 2 days ago. Some gentleman got a picture of the anti-tail along with the comet.
Yeah.
Very, very impressive work. And
Well, Matthew, what I would tell you is get out there with your phone and try it because the modern phones really do a great job of recording the night sky. And as long as you don't have any lights shining directly into the lens, you
okay,
have a reasonable chance of recording something. So
well, I have
you
a
won't know
tripod.
if you don't try it.
I've got a tripod. I also have a, a Canon Rebel DSLR R4 uh, camera uh, that I can program it to exposure times by using the menu. Uh, so what I might do tomorrow night is go to the west side of town. There are places where, see, we're in a valley, but there's no mountains to the direct west of me. There's mountains all around the other, to the north, south, east, and north, south, and east. But I can, I think I can drive, maybe 10 miles or so
Hey,
and set
it's
up the
worth a
tripod.
shot.
Yep.
I really need to get out. Yeah, even though the car looks like hell. All
You
It'll be
you do
dark.
need to
Nobody will
get
see it.
you
right.
do
Well,
need to get started pretty soon here because we're
yeah.
already past the closest point, and
Yes.
it may start to fade.
It's already past the perihelion, and I use the SkyX Pro for planning, and I'm quite aware of the track, and I use the websites. There's a weekly comet report coming out of Japan that has it's a clearinghouse of worldwide reports on comets, and all that. So, I got the power of the internet to help me in that respect. Yeah,
All right. Well, give it a try.
yeah, you guys are encouraging me.
All right.
All right, thank you.
Jeff, were there any other questions that folks have bounced off you, or is something?
Yeah, I have one question in my queue from a while back. A general question about tips for cable management, which it depends on where the cables are coming from and how much is up topside and whether you have any through the mount capabilities and all that. But the question is why do I need to worry about it? And assuming I do, how do I manage cables in a sensible way? I mean, I'm willing to start off with the answer because I've gone from, I mean, I could show you before and after pictures with like some of the worst cable management ever.
I have an idea for you.
Is pretty clean.
I have an idea for you. If you go to the hardware stores, they got these Velcro straps that you can get to help you to like manage your cables better. You could Velcro them together, in all kinds of different configurations to keep it from turning into spaghetti.
To go back to the first question, do you need to worry about it?
Well, that's another thing.
Is yes.
Jeff, I'm always just practical me, minimum technology. If you can run through a from one side of the sky to the other and not get any cable fouls, you're good. Don't look at it. It can be ugly as hell. Don't worry about it. If you don't get any cable snags, that's fine. If you looked at mine, you'd say, how can that ever work? Because looks like spaghetti, but I've got the stuff. It's loose where it needs to be loose. It's tight where it needs to be tight, and it doesn't hang up. So that's the simple answer. If you try to make it pretty, it probably won't work.
Yeah, I think it depends on the kind of scope you're using. Randy, you're using a Newt these days. I have a refractor. My original mount was a Lost Mandy, which if you've seen those things, the motors stick out like barnacles from the axes, and there's lots of places where cables can drag over the motors. And ultimately, in addition to the little Velcro straps that Matt talked about, I used some of those, but I also got some of these plastic looms. It's like a spring-loaded plastic tube that slit down one side. You can peel it open, put wires into it, and it closes back up on itself. And so you can bind a couple of cables together. And then, with a refractor, at least, when you got to get things away from the mount, the best trick is send it off the back.
Right. And the ultimate is, and it's probably going to end up this way anyway, eventually, is wireless.
Well, I mean, certainly, if your mount allows through the mount cabling, it makes an enormous difference.
Yeah.
I haven't seen wireless get reliable enough yet. And of course, some of the cables going up to the top of the mount are powered. And I don't think we're quite there yet on
no, not for power.
Wireless power.
Pardon me, I lose my train of thought. I'm 67 years old.
You're a kid in the street.
I already lost it.
Yeah, I lost my train of thought. Sorry, guys.
No worries.
Yeah.
Anybody else want to chime in on cable management?
Yeah, I have a
I think you hit the nail on the head when you talked about the stuff on the mount that can actually, catch the cable. I think that's probably 2/3 of the issue is to, eliminate or work around the stuff that's hanging on the mount so that there's nothing for the cable to drag over.
Yeah.
And then during
Dave, were you gonna?
Yeah, I was going to say, well, I learned through experience because the more mistakes you make, the more you learn. And the only cable I had a specific issue with was the micro USB that goes to the keypad for my AVX mount. It was too long and it got caught once in the little levers of the tripod legs and it caused a little problem when I tried to do a meridian flip. I go out there and I find that the telescope, the OTA is pointing down to the ground. So once I cinched that up, it was no problem. But um, when I went to the back of the image train to do galaxies, I was able to get cables from Amazon that were the exact right fit that I needed. So I didn't have anything hardly any problems with the cables, but just some like regular Velcro stuff you can use to wrap around the cables can help. The key is just the length of the cables. I'm going to try to find some shorter cables that are the exact right fit. And I think at one time when I first got started, somebody from the TA mentioned there was a company you could order custom cables from, and I forgot the name of the company, and I forgot who said it, but there was somebody who was touting that, and I never looked into it. I just found the right size cables that I needed for my purpose based on my scope. If I go to the AM5N, that does have slots where you can put your cables to make it a lot easier.
Okay, those are all good suggestions. All right. Well, actually, we'll go ahead and get started. I was going to be the main speaker tonight, so let me see if I can share my screen to start off here. All right, can everybody see that?
Yes.
Yep.
Yep. Publish your image, why and how.
Okay. Yeah, I thought we'd do something a little different this evening and talk about what to do with all those images that we've created. And this would be the one of the ways to do that. So the reason I thought this would be of interest to the group in particular is because over the last several months, I've seen some really, really outstanding images. And I think that we deserve, or the folks in this group who are doing these images deserve to have them seen by a wider audience than perhaps just the folks in our little group are the folks who subscribe to the Desert Sky Bulletin. So let me see if I can get started here. Okay, so the why I kind of already alluded to. If you've got great images, which this group does, then that's probably the main reason why you'd want to share those images with other folks. And I think what brings this to mind is when I see images in a magazine or on a website or in a newsletter, I usually go back and say, have I imaged that target and is this better than mine or have I done better than this? And lately, most of the images I see, I can say, well, this was way better than what I did a year ago or 2 years ago. And so I think that's what a lot of us do is we compare the images we see in print to the ones that we've done ourselves. And that's a good thing because that lets you decide whether or not your images are up to par. Another reason for publishing your images is just for the prestige of it, for bragging rights. Not everybody's into bragging rights, but you might like to share with your family and friends that, I got this image published and this is where they published it. So for a lot of folks, that's something that they look forward to. A kind of more personal reason is just the satisfaction for yourself of saying, well, this was a good image. I sent it in and sure enough, somebody thought it was good enough to put it in print. So self-satisfaction is obviously an important reason for wanting to publish your image. I kind of threw this in just for grins. is that this is a good way of justifying spending more money on Astro gear for the members of your family. When you can, thank you for the laugh, when you can tell them, well, I got this published with my $1,000 telescope. Just think what if I had a $10,000 telescope, what I could do. So sometimes that goes over, a lot of times it won't. But there is sometimes a real benefit to getting images published. And I share with you here some prices from Sky and Telescope. This is a few years old now, but they do pay you if they decide to use one of your images, particularly if they use it as a full page or a half page. You can get a few bucks from them, as well as some of the other magazines. And again, this brings up the philosophical question is, if somebody pays you $100 for your half-page image, does that make you a professional or are you still an amateur? So I'll leave that philosophical question to kind of ferment in the back of your mind. But it's always nice if somebody picks up one of your images and say, yeah, we're willing to pay you $50 or $100 to use your image in our article. So those are kind of some of the whys. In terms of the hows, we'll spend a little bit of time thinking about that, but here are the things that I think you need to keep in mind. You want to submit high quality data, well-focused, well-calibrated, well-processed. And again, as I mentioned already, the images that I've seen coming out of our little group here in the TAAA really do meet all of those. They're well-focused, they're well-calibrated, and they're especially well-processed with the modern tools that we have available now. You want to only submit your best images, but for some of you, that could be just about all of your images. Of course, the images that are most likely to get picked up for publication are ones where there's something really interesting, an interesting crop of a typical image, an image that has a long integration where you've spent many, many hours collecting the data and it shows through in the final image, or when you've used some unique combination of filters. And I know a lot of the folks in this group do that. They do long integrations and they do use unique combinations of filters with unique processing. You want to submit the highest resolution images that you can. Most of the publications will take uncompressed JPEG images. Some of them do accept high resolution TIFF or PNG type images as well. But most of the time they have pretty well-defined guidelines. But you do want to try to submit the highest resolution image that you have available. And thinking about this, thinking about why your image might be publishable, a couple of things come to mind. One, if you have an unusual target, and you can usually tell your target is not the usual target simply by going onto Bing or Google and seeing how many other images you pull up when you put in the name of your image. And if you don't see more than just a handful, you can be pretty certain that not a lot of folks have been imaging that particular target. A lot of times you'll get contacted by a publication if they're looking for a particular image for an article that they're planning. And this has happened to me on a couple of occasions where you get an email requesting the use of an image because it fits into some specific article that the publication has in mind. And last but not least, if you have an image that represents something that's technically difficult to come up with, a lot of times the web pages or in-print publishers will be interested in something like that. So those are all things that may lead to your image getting put into publication. There are two basic ways to go about this. The first way is just what I refer to as the passive approach. And that's where you make your image or images publicly available. And that's what a lot of you do, either with a website or by putting them on Flickr or Astrobin. You put them out in the public so that folks that are searching for specific images can find them. The advantage to the passive approach is easy. You just sit back and wait for someone to request permission to use your image. Unfortunately, that sounds easier than it really is. The disadvantage being that this becomes very competitive, again, unless you have images of uncommon targets where not a lot of folks are imaging that particular target. And in addition, a disadvantage is that the portal or web page that you have needs to be searchable. For those of you who are familiar with how web pages work, you probably have heard of search engine optimization, where the keywords or the way the web page is constructed has a lot to do with whether or not it shows up at the top of an image search or not. And I won't go into that in great detail, but again, if you're posting images on a web page, that makes it fairly important. If you're putting them on a portal, then it's open for anyone who's searching the web. The other alternative, and the one that I think probably works a little bit better for most imagers, is active submission. That's where you take your image and you submit it to a publisher where you think that there's a reasonable chance that they would be interested in your image. And the benefit there, or the advantage, is that you can target your image to a specific publisher who you can determine might be interested in your image. Now, a lot of the publishers that I'm going to talk about later, they take a wide range of different types of images, and we'll go through some of that. But there are specific publishers where they're looking for a comet image or a solar image. And if that's your specialty, or if that's where you have high quality data, then you know about those publications, and that's where you should go to look for to try to submit your image. The disadvantage is just the same as it is for the passive approach, in that it's very competitive. A lot of folks produce a lot of images, and a lot of folks submit those images to different publishers in hopes that they can get their image into print. So those are two approaches, and I'll briefly discuss passive, and we'll spend the rest of the time talking about active. So in terms of passive submissions, again, as I alluded to earlier, you need to make sure that your image can be found if somebody is searching for a particular target. And one of the ways of doing that is to search for it yourself. And again, if you search for M42 or M31, you'll probably find 100,000 different images. But if you search for something specific or attach your name to it, at least you'll find whether or not your image pops up in a generalized Google search. If you put in M31 in your last name and it doesn't show up, then that image is probably not going to be found by someone who's looking for that particular target. You want to make sure that you use the technical designation for your image, whether it's NGC or IC or Messier, because that's where most of the editorial boards are going to be searching for particular images. And if you can just attach a description to the image, that's helpful, as long as you use that technical designation. You can use the common names like Iris Nebula where appropriate, but that should be attached to the technical description so that someone who's searching for a particular image isn't confused by looking for something that's described by one person as the Iris Nebula, and maybe a different image is described the same way. So there are a lot of confusion because there's a lot of names floating around for different nebula based on what people think they look like. And that probably won't do you as much good as using the technical designations. You can include a copyright or watermark with your image. Those are optional. Some publishers reject watermarked images and some don't, and we'll kind of see some examples of that in a few minutes. So that's something to keep in mind if you do watermark your images, or if you put your copyright on it. A small copyright in the very corner probably is not going to attract a lot of attention, but a large watermark or a large copyright notice may not attract attention from people who are not looking for that. So who are the potential users for passively for these? Magazines, books, newsletters, and websites. Anyone who's planning an article, writing a book, has a newsletter that is addressing a particular topic or particular type of target, and a lot of websites that do the same thing. So those are all potential users of your images that are just out there sitting on the web. If you are contacted, the first thing you want to do is, obviously, if you think it's a valid request, is to grant them permission to use your image. They should specify the exact image that they want to use, but then specify how you want to be recognized, whether you want your name, your website, your email, specify how you'd like to be recognized with the image, not just that they can use your image and you don't get any recognition. You should probably ask for a copy of the publication, or at least at a minimum, a link to the publication. This works out pretty good. I've gotten a couple of free textbooks where someone wanted to use a picture, and you end up getting a $20 textbook because they used one image of yours for the whole text. So be sure to ask for a copy of the magazine, or a link to the website or magazine when it's published, so that you can go and see that they did recognize you in the correct fashion. It's a good idea to keep a copy of the request and your permission email, because sometimes these things are months away from being published, and you want to be able to go back and see, I gave this guy permission 6 months ago, and I haven't heard from them what's going on. Do they use the image or not? So keeping a mail folder with just things that you've given requests permission for is a good idea. So let's talk about active submission for a minute. Again, typically what you do for active submission is you send a link, the URL or a link to, and/or the image itself, to a specific target publisher. And again, most of the publications have guidelines that are available online. Most of the publications limit the size, some don't, but some do. And you can submit a JPEG lower resolution image, but if you have a higher resolution image in your image bank, then you should tell them that, because they may decide that they want to do a full page spread of your image, and the JPEG may not meet their requirements for publication. So always indicate whether or not you have a higher resolution image available if they decide to use your image. Just as for the passive submission, you want to use the technical designation again, because most of the editorial folks are going to search for images using that. And again, include the name using that technical designation in the subject line of your email. I've had a couple of editors remind me of this, that they liked the image, but they said we weren't sure what you were sending. So you want to be sure to include the title or the name of the target in the subject line of the email. And then in the email itself, you can attach a brief description. Again, using the common names only when they're appropriate. So if it's a really common one, like the Lagoon Nebula or the Iris Nebula, or the name of a galaxy that's well recognized, then you should probably include that in your brief description. So M31, the Andromeda Galaxy, would be an appropriate description. Again, watermarks and copyrights, not usually accepted, but there are a lot of exceptions. I would suggest, if you're going to actively submit an item to a publisher that you don't have it copyrighted or watermarked, simply because that may cause them to overlook it right away. So what do you need to include in your email? And again, the name and a description of the target, the date of acquisition, whether it's over one night or several nights, and the scope, camera, and filters used. You probably don't need to include a lot more than just that basic information, along with the length of the total exposure. If you're submitting a DSLR image, then you probably need to include the lens that was used, the ISO that the image was shot at, and the total exposure time. And then, of course, you want to include your personal contact information, your name, your mailing address, so they can send you a copy of the magazine if they publish your image, your email address, and your phone number, because they may want to contact you about cropping your image or some minor processing changes. So make sure you include your personal contact information. So here's an example, excuse me, here's an example email of an image I submitted to Sky and Telescope many years ago. Again, in the subject line, I've included the technical description of the targets, and then please accept the following image for their reader's gallery, and then a link to the image as in JPEG format on my website. And then image data, again, the name of the image, and basically that these are a mission nebula in Orion, and it also includes a dark nebula. The date of the image is the exposure. Here I routinely record how many minutes through each filter, but again, they don't usually print that. They usually just want to know the total exposure time, and then the camera used and the filters used. I include the telescope and the mount, but again, that's not generally something that gets included. You probably do want to tell them where the image was acquired, because they sometimes print that in the text that goes along with the image. I didn't include my personal contact information here because I don't want it to go into this recording. But again, you need to include that at the bottom of your email so that they can contact you. Okay, so what types of images do you want to actively submit? Well, of course, first of all, something timely is going to stand a good chance of getting into print. And if you remember, we had a total eclipse back in April. The June and July issues of the magazine were already in the pipeline, probably August as well. So the September issue of Sky and Telescope has a lot of eclipse pictures. And here's one of them. And again, you can see this guy sent in his eclipse picture, and they added all of the verbiage that you see there: glittering diamond, first rays of sunlight, etc., from a really nice eclipse picture that was submitted to the gallery section of Sky and Telescope and made it into the September issue. You can see down at the bottom there, this was shot with a Canon Rebel 70 to 300 millimeter zoom lens, total exposure, etc., ISO, etc. So that's the kind of information that they want when you submit your image. So anything timely, like the comet that's now currently visible, is going to show up probably in the January and February issues of a lot of the astronomy magazines, and even sooner on websites and newsletters. Another thing that will get you in print is if you got something that's off the beaten path or that's an unusual target. So here's an astronomy picture of the day from a couple months ago. This was shot somewhere in the desert in Tunisia, and the photographer got a really unusual foreground object, some little hut with a light inside with a guy standing in front of it, along in front of the Milky Way with Scorpio in the background and Ophiuchus, and he also caught was probably a Perseid meteor going by. So the editors at the APOD thought this was a pretty unique image, And of course, it made the astronomy picture of the day. So if you have something that's unusual, that's off the beaten path, you can think about sending it to APOD. Another type of image that does draw a lot of attention for publishers are common targets with a twist. So here's a good example of that. This is just a few galaxies that are grouped together in a quintet in the constellation Grus, but the photographer, in this case, a well-known comet photographer, Gerald Raymond, happened to catch one comet 2020 V2 passing right by this group of galaxies. And sure enough, that was enough to attract the attention of the publishers. I believe this was in Sky and Telescope as well. And again, you can see the details of his system there listed at the bottom, supplied along with the image. So again, common targets with a comet passing in front of them, or the International Space Station going in front of the moon or in front of the sun. Those are things that tend to attract the attention because they're targets that everybody recognizes, but there's something very unusual about them. And of course, you can just submit your favorite image. It doesn't have to be any of the above that we talked about. It could just be a really great image that you're really proud of. And that's what this APOD from last July 26 was. This guy took a nice image of NGC 6946. Beautiful image, well done, well processed. And the APOD editors felt strongly enough that this was a really great image that they selected it as the astronomy picture of the day. So if you don't have anything that's unusual, it's off the beaten path, that's really timely, you can still submit your best nebula, galaxy, or other type of image. Okay, so let's just spend a minute or so here talking about where to submit your images. I mentioned APOD, the astronomy picture of the day. APOD is kind of the Oscars of astroimaging. If you can get these guys to select one of your images, you can feel very proud that you've accomplished something, because this is a well-recognized source for high quality astronomy pictures. It's run by these two guys, Bob Nemiroff and Jerry Bonnell, a couple of professional astronomers. They've been doing this for over 25 years. Nemiroff is at Michigan Tech and Bonnell is at the University of Maryland. And this is the official NASA website for astronomy pictures. So they get a lot of their pictures from NASA. But if you do send them in images, they will contact you a few days before they put your image up so that you can review what they've written about it and make sure that they've got all the technical information correct. You might be asking yourself, well, what's the odds of me getting one of my images to be the astronomy pictures of the day? Well, I went back and looked at the APOD content for a 30-day period from July 5th to August 6th. And it turns out the 30 images that were posted over that period, there were 10 professional images from the Webb telescope and Hubble and other professional images, but the majority of the images were amateur images. Fully 2/3, 20 of the 30 images that were published amateur images. And here's a breakdown of what was published during that month. The leader was atmospheric phenomena, noctilucent clouds, auroras, of which there were quite a few. And that was 5 of the 20 images were of those atmospheric things. So if you have those types of images, don't be hesitant to submit them to APOD. There were quite a few nightscapes as well. That's typically the Milky Way, like the image I showed you earlier from August. That was one of the nightscapes that made it to APOD. There were some timely images where there were either an occultation, meteors, other types of images like that, comets. Those are all things that occur one time that made it into the APOD catalog. And then looking at some of the deep sky stuff, star clusters were kind of popular that month. There were actually 3 images that were just star clusters. There was one galaxy. I think I showed you that image just a few minutes ago. And then there were several different nebula: reflection, dusty, emission nebula, planetary nebula, and one supernova remnant. So you can see there's a pretty good range of amateur type images. And of course, I know a lot of the folks in this group could see themselves submitting images to APOD, and I would suggest that that be one of the first places you look. Another popular spot for submitting your images is the gallery section of Sky and Telescope magazine, probably one of the more popular sources for publication. You send your image to gallery@skyandtelescope.com. That's an email address, and then send a link to the image with the appropriate info that we've discussed already. And they typically publish 4 to 6 images every month. Sometimes it's just a couple images, sometimes it's more, but typically it's about 4 to 6 images. And if you go to the magazine gallery at the very bottom, they've got the link address there about their guidelines for what they're looking for. I did the same thing looking at the last 12 months of Sky and Telescope. Went back through my old issues and kind of counted up what got published. And as you can see there, it's a little different than APOD. The majority of the images that got published were actually nebula. 15 out of about 50 or 60 images were of nebula. There were a lot of solar eclipse images simply because there were a couple of solar eclipses in the last 12 months. And again, those are timely type topics that the magazines are interested in. There were 7 galaxies, quite a few sunspot images because the sun's been active. There were several moon images, 3 images of Jupiter, a few meteor images, some aurora images, again, because of the solar activity. There were a couple of images where comets were going past galaxies. That seems to be always an interesting topic for these publications. And then as you can see there were individual images of Saturn, the Milky Way, some stars, supernova remnant. There was one image where it had a nice image of the green flash. And of course, the typical International Space Station passing in front of the sun. So those are the types of images that Sky and Telescope published in the last year. And I think it gives you a pretty good idea of the types of things that you might want to submit. Astronomy magazine also has a reader gallery. They publish 4 to 6 images every month. You send them a URL and the attached image. They typically want you to send the URL to a link to the image, as well as a moderately sized copy of the image itself. So you need to attach that image to the email that you send them, and their address is readergallery@astronomy.com. I would have done the content breakdown for them, but I realized as I was preparing this that my astronomy subscription ran out a couple months back, so I didn't have a whole year's worth of back issues to go look through, but I've since re-established that submission. There's a couple other magazines that do publish a lot of images. Sky at Night is the BBC's astronomy magazine. It's a British astronomy magazine. Don't let that dissuade you. They publish quite a few images. I don't have a good count for how many they do, but they tend to put user images throughout the magazine, as well as a gallery section at the end of the magazine. So you'd have a good chance of getting images published there as well. And their contact information is there. Contact us at Sky and Night Magazine. Reflector Magazine is the official publication of the Astronomical League. It gets published quarterly. I think you need to be a member of the Astronomical League to get your image published. I'm not 100% certain on that. And they typically publish 3 to 5 images a month in a gallery at the end of the magazine. However, they're also interested in user images for different articles. And so many times you may actively submit something for their gallery and they end up using it for something else. Another magazine that's not well known but publishes a lot of images is Astronomy Now. It's a British astronomy magazine, and they accept TIFF or JPEG images, and their email address is Gallery 2024. I think they change that each year, so next year it'll be Gallery 2025. But again, they also publish a lot of user images. Most of them are from Great Britain, but it wouldn't hurt to submit your images there as well. I didn't want to stop without mentioning that sometimes the most unusual image gets published. And this is an image that I took of M24, which I needed to complete the Messier imaging program for the Astronomical League. So I took a quick image of this back a few months ago. It was only a 55-minute long RGB image that I sent into them. It's the small Sagittarius stars cloud. And the editor contacted me and said, can we crop this down because we want to use it for the cover of the magazine, which they did in June of 2024. So you might be surprised at what gets published, but you have to submit it in order for that to happen. So I'm going to leave you with a listing of the addresses for sending your images in: APOD, Sky and Telescope, Astronomy, Sky at Night, Reflector, Astronomy Now. And those are the addresses. And I challenge each of you to copy these down. I'll post them later on the website, on the forum. But I challenge each of you to send some images in to some of these potential places to get your images published. And I'll be looking forward to seeing some of our members having images in Sky and Telescope or Astronomy or even on APOD in the coming months. So I'll stop there, and if there are questions, I'd be happy to try to answer those.
Greg, there's one question in the chat if you want to pop that open for a second from Matthew Oda.
Do you see it?
What is your opinion of placing your image name, description, copyright embedded in the metadata? I guess you can do that, and it depends on whether or not the metadata goes with the image that you submit. I don't know that the typical image that we submit as a JPEG file would necessarily have the metadata. Now, if you shoot it on a DSLR, I suspect that, yeah, the metadata does get embedded, but I'm not sure.
What I do with mine is I use a program called View, which is freeware. It allows you to very easily enter metadata into the image, and it's quick and easy. I highly recommend it. Can I make another point?
Before you go on, though, I would mention that I've never been asked for metadata for images that I've submitted.
Okay.
And as I said, I usually put the exposure information in the email for an active submission, or if they request an image, many times they don't care what you shot it with. They just need an image for a particular article. So yeah, you
Okay,
can probably
so what do you
include
do
it,
to,
but I'm not sure that it's necessary.
what do you do to save all that information after you've taken the image? Do you have, is it a text file, a Word document,
Well, I
catalog?
usually include it on my website. And
I
I
see.
know
You
if you
publish
use,
them on a website.
yeah, if
Okay.
you use Astrobin, there's all kind of data that is accompanying the image. So
All right.
it really depends on the portal that you use, or if you have a personal website, how you display the data. I usually display the image along with the acquisition data.
Okay. Can I make a couple of points?
Sure.
Number one, you forgot to mention publishing in a newspaper. And I had the good fortune of having one of my pictures published in the Orange County Register back in California. And when the columnist doesn't really ask for too many technical information, he wants things called a byline and captions, so he doesn't have to do it himself. You can submit the way I was able to do this was as a member of the OCA. Their website has a built-in uh, members gallery that's quite well organized. And what happened was the newspaper reporter uh, checked that particular part of the website, which was publicly accessible. And basically, it was a picture of Mercury transiting across the sun. Since it was high contrast, it showed up well in a newspaper. So,
Yeah, that's a good
and
point.
the other
Oh, go
I
ahead. I'm
think of
sorry.
the other point I had. I forget right now, but I'll get back to you. I had a second thing to say.
Well, that's good about the newspaper. Another thing that's useful that I didn't mention is find the email addresses of the local weather people on the local news stations.
They'll put it
If
on
you have a
television.
picture of a comet or
Yeah.
aurora or something that happened that night, if you get that to them before 10 o'clock at night, many times that's the kicker that they end up the 10:30 news with. So I
Okay.
used to keep email addresses of the local weather people, because a lot of times, they'll tell you to go out and look for this comet, and most people don't know where to look. But if you can send them a picture, they're more than happy to throw that in at the end of their weathercast. So
Okay. I'll throw in another story. Again, using the Orange County Astronomers website online gallery, I uploaded artwork, and it was the Flammarion woodcut, but he's looking out of through the firmament, and he's seeing the Hubble uh, deep image. And I published that on the website. And what happened was a college professor in Puerto Rico saw it, and he asked for my permission to use that on the cover of his textbook. Uh, Unfortunately, I was not compensated monetarily with it, and he just gave me credit in the frontispiece of the book.
you didn't get a
But
copy of the
again,
book?
well, I have a photograph of the cover.
Okay.
I'll upload it to the what do you call it, the
Our forum.
your forum, which is through that email thing, right?
Yes.
Okay, and then the mistake I made, I didn't push enough for any kind of compensation. I should have asked for a copy of the book itself. I didn't do that. But you never know. Like the first part of your presentation, you were talking about putting your pictures where people can just find them. And the Orange County astronomers, one way or another, they got a lot of exposure to various organizations with that software. It was an add-on to their webpage. They still use it to this very day. I don't know what it's called, but I highly recommend it. It allows the users to upload their photograph to the website, and then the webmaster organizes it under category and also under the name of the astrophotographer. If you guys would like, I could attach URL to that particular gallery system. And I think it might help you guys to get more exposure just by having it there. I got the transit photograph published and a book cover without even having to actually submit it anywhere. It was just found.
That's a good example of passive submission.
Yep.
Yeah, it was passive submission through the Orange County Astronomers website, Astro Image Gallery. And they've had it there for, gosh, about 15 years now. Yeah.
Okay, other questions?
I got
Comments?
one. Um, can you actually transmit a TIFF image?
I'm sorry, say that again.
Can you actually translate or transmit an image in TIFF format?
You can, but they tend to be very large. And that's why
But you were saying, because you were saying some of them kind of want it in TIFF, like Sky and Telescope or whatever, or because it would be my inclination to send an uncompressed JPEG.
yeah, that's the main way to do it. But you should also mention that if they want a higher resolution version, that you can supply it, because if they're just going to put it in the gallery, then usually the JPEG is sufficient. But if they want to do a whole page enlargement of the image, they may want a higher resolution, in which case they'll tell you, send it to this particular mail address, or put it in our Dropbox or something where they can accommodate a large size file.
Yeah, okay. Because I was wondering how, because then it would still have to be under 25 megabytes, though I understand that nothing bigger than that can be transmitted. Is that correct?
It depends on your mail server and where you're sending it and how you're sending it.
Oh, okay. Because it was my understanding that you couldn't send anything other than in JPEG. You know.
No, you can put it in a Dropbox and send them the link to the Dropbox, and it can be 100 megabytes. May take them a while to download it, but they can get it.
Yeah. All right. So that's okay.
And
Now
you can email them a thumbnail and give them the link to the Dropbox so they can get a preview, of your image.
okay. Because I'm thinking of sending a couple of my images to Sky and Telescope.
Good. Do that.
And I saw that one you commented of. I sent you for publication in the TAAA, the newsletter. It didn't make it. I guess I sent it too late. It didn't make this last one. NGC 253. You commented on how great it was. Remember?
Well, not all the images that get submitted get into the newsletter.
Okay.
I have a whole bunch of images that have been submitted over the last month that didn't make it into the newsletter this month, because the only thing that made it in were the comet images. We decided to just put comet images in. So just because you didn't see it right away doesn't mean it won't get in there eventually.
Uh-huh. The last one I didn't remember there being comet images. It was other galaxy images. Maybe now this time around it'll probably be comet.
Yeah, the October newsletter. It's not out yet. Wait a couple days.
Right.
Oh, okay. Oh, wait, the October news, we already had the October meeting.
Okay, well, it's coming out in October. It'll be the November newsletter, right?
Yeah. And so.
No, so again, I encourage all of you to use the information I provided you and submit some images. Let's see what we can get in publication.
Greg, just as a footnote to one of your comments, I did notice that a couple, the APOD image and one of the other ones, did have a very tiny name. I don't know if there was copyright there. I couldn't resolve it.
I'm sorry. I should have.
But there were little legends on a couple of the pictures, very subtle.
APOD is one of the ones that if you have a small copyright or your name in the corner, many times they'll leave it in. Some of the other publications don't, but APOD is one of the ones they pretty much take whatever you send them. And don't be afraid to try sending something to them. Other questions? Okay, well, thank you for your attention. We
Oh,
used up
listen,
most of
I
the
got
hour.
one other, I've got one other question, and it's regarding imaging itself. If
Okay.
that's okay. How do I get rid of, how do I deal with color gradients? And I get on the back of, occasionally I get it, like it comes out, uh, after it.
Hey, Paul, can you sit closer to your mic? It's hard to hear you.
Oh, okay. Can you hear me now?
Better.
That seems better.
Hear
Thank
me
you.
now? Okay. All right. Um, how do you deal with or eliminate color gradients on the back of like just the general background? They're trying to get it black. And like on a couple of mine, it came out with one side is slightly tinted toward like yellow and the other side toward blue.
Anybody want to try to answer that?
What are you using? What are you using? Are you using fixed insight?
That is correct. Yes. Uh-huh.
There's
I've been using SPCC.
Well, but what are
no,
you
that
doing to
won't do
remove the
it.
gradient, Paul?
Yeah. But
SETI
there's
has an
something in the
excellent
back.
script out called automatic DBA or DBE, automatic, you know,
Oh, automatic
dynamic
DB,
background extraction that I find is quite good. And then
automatic.
GraphXpert can
Yeah, well,
also
I've used
do
that.
what you're looking for.
I've used both automatic background extraction, and then there's also dynamic background extraction. I use
Paul,
them
Alan
both.
is talking about something new. It's a
Oh,
script from SETI Astro it uses DBE, but it has an algorithm that places the points for you. It's sort of, think of it as a
okay.
very modern version of ABE, but it works better
Uh-huh.
than.
Oh,
I
okay.
find it to be quite good.
But you need to
But
be doing background extraction for starters. What do you use?
yes, well, I have been using both dynamic background extraction and automatic background extraction. In some cases, I use both on an image. And the dynamic doesn't seem to eliminate the stuff. There's always still, where part of it is a little brighter than somewhere else or in it.
Uh,
And I've been able to suppress it on the final images in some cases. But that's one of the things that, it looks like everything else I've been able to do. Also, Jeff, you a while back when you had that talk up in the Oro Valley, and I came, remember, you had that about getting that hyperbolic curve thing. I haven't been able, it wouldn't allow me to do it, download that. I wanted to download that. And I was just wondering also because that'll extend the dynamic range really well.
Well, another tool that's really good is GraphXpert. That's free tool for gradient correction. PixInsight has their own gradient correction tool, although it's pretty much a manual approach. You really have to know how to use it. It's more complex, but GraphXpert works good. Auto DBE from SETI Astro. Um, he's basically using the existing tools in PixInsight and he's putting together in process containers and he's automating that workflow for you. The nice thing about it though is you can select portions of the image that you don't want it to affect. Like if you're doing like an emission nebula and you don't want it to ruin it, you can say just don't pick the. You can actually use your click and your mouse and click, and you can draw around it using like a square or a rectangle, and you can omit that from being calculated. Just like when you use dynamic background extraction, you only want to choose the background. You don't want to choose something that's really bright, or you want to avoid the nebulosity. So there are some nice things about SETI Astro's tool, but a lot of times I'll just have a couple of the tools and I'll play with it and see which one I like the best. They're not always equal depending on the object that you're editing.
Oh, okay. So can I use this along with PixInsight?
Yeah, all of them.
Mhm.
They're all free. So if you go into YouTube and you look up SETI Astro's YouTube site, he has a link that you can set up in your repository for your resources under PixInsight. And he basically has his entire suite of stuff, not just auto DBE. He has this statistical stretch tool and his star stretch tool and all these other tools that he has that will populate your PixInsight menu when you go to scripts. Same thing with Graxpert. You just look it up. You can a lot of YouTubers have demonstrated it, and they supply the link that you're going to use in your repository to add it in.
One
Yeah,
thing
this
is,
It's
the
easy to
problem.
get a gradient in your image. It's not so easy to get a color gradient. Can you post to the forum a low resolution version of that image that you think has a color gradient in it? It might be fun to see that image and make some guesses as to what's going on there.
Oh, okay. Well, let me see
Just
here.
take a low resolution version of that and post it with your, with your comment in the forum. And if it's
Okay,
obvious from the low resolution version, then we may be able to figure out what's going on. But a color gradient is hard to produce.
okay. Uh, you see it? Okay, anybody want to guess what this is?
Well, it's in the title, so
NGC
if we can all read.
7331 looks like it.
31.
I
Okay,
think that's
now,
NGC
see now here,
7331.
okay, now here over on this side, we're pretty dark. You see the background sky? Now look over here. You see how these little, it's a little bit kind of yellowish, kind of like stains
Mm.
in the image.
I
Like say,
don't see that, but
It's
I'm
not coming
using a
through in the
notebook
video,
computer.
Paul.
okay, pardon, what was that?
It's not visible in the resolution of the video is not high enough to see it.
Oh, okay, maybe not.
So
It's not all that.
post a decent version to the group's IO chat. Don't do it here.
Oh, okay. All right. But anyway, I mean, here's an example of something I got. And incidentally, I mean, this was taken with a 6-inch and using blur exterminator. Like this might be something I might want to get published, you know.
It's a nice picture.
Excellent
It
picture.
is.
And there's
If you crop
Stefan's
it,
quintet. Whoever thought you could image Stefan's quintet with a 6-inch telescope like
well,
this?
with modern CCD cameras, aperture is not a big issue anymore.
Yeah.
I used to
But
do
anyway,
40-second
but I mean, there's a
exposures
slight.
on a 24-inch at Mount Wilson, and as I understand it now, I'm in touch with Michael Covington. I'm sure you guys have heard of.
Uh,
In his opinion, it's not critical anymore to have a large aperture telescopes to get good images of DSOs with shorter exposure times.
yeah. Well, this took 43 times 5, 43 5-minute frames that were stacked to create this image.
Okay.
Send it to
So,
Sky and Telescope.
Um,
pardon?
Your
I,
field of view.
I have
But
a
I've got some
question
even. Yes. Uh-huh.
about while you were on the topic of software. As I understand it, PixInsight is today the most popular image processing suite.
Uh-huh.
Uh,
Yeah.
I
It is
was
it
I
is the
was
most
trained to
popular one among
use
this group.
I was trained to use CCD soft by Software Bisque. I had no choice because I was working at Mount Wilson Observatory at the time. But the astronomy club, they were all using Maxim DXL, I think it was called.
Yeah.
Uh, but I've been out of astroimaging for about 4 years, so I haven't kept up with the development of the software, and I haven't really looked into it too much because I have to take things a step at a time. I got to get a decent telescope again. By the way, my equipment was stolen, unfortunately,
Oh,
all of it.
So
Um,
Sorry to hear that, Matt. So
Well,
listen, one
these
of the
things
things that
happen,
we're
and
planning.
it took me a while to get over it.
Oh,
But anyways, am I correct in saying that Pix Insight is the tool of choice nowadays for astroimagers?
Pretty
yeah.
much.
Pretty
Certainly
much.
one of them. And Matt, we're planning starting next month some software comparison presentations. Next month, Dave Stern and I are going to talk about the ASI Air and Nina on the acquisition side. But another good topic would be to talk about the processing side. So it's a great idea that we'll factor into the presentation planning for the months ahead.
Yeah, if you see my second comment in my chat, uh, I've been using the Sky software for years again because I had no choice because it was being used at the Mount Wilson Observatory. Um, and I used it. I had to do a lecture at the Columbia Science Center at Downey. They wanted me to lecture on that comet ISON. And as I went through all that rigmarole, making the PowerPoint, and I tracked the comet with using the uh, orbital information and found out that actually it wasn't a 1 month, it was more like a 3 month thing, that comet was going to pass right in front of the Pleiades. And it kind of really jazzed me because I discovered something that nobody else even knew yet. And I alerted a whole bunch of people. But again, I say, unfortunately, that comet evaporated at perihelion, so it didn't turn out to do what I wanted it to do.
I think a lot of tools enable you to do that. Stellarium, you can put in a comet and project it out weeks or a couple months ahead. So it's certainly
Okay.
something to play with. But
And
listen,
Stellarium's
I know,
free.
Greg, that we're just about out of time, and I've got two administrative announcements that I'd like to make.
Please.
So first of all, a reminder about the 2024 imaging contest. We are about halfway through our window from September to December. Entry the details on the categories and the rules and everything are on the forum. Deadline is December 15th, to me, submitted by December 15th, 11:59 p.m. So keep those entries coming, and certainly, Greg, once a winner is selected, we'll have to submit it to all your magazines.
Yeah.
So that's number one. Don't forget about the contest, and also a reminder that Starzona has kindly donated a $100 gift certificate for the winner in each of our three categories: nightscapes, DSOs, and solar system / planetary. Announcement number two: for some of the really deep dive troubleshooting kinds of problems, like Paul, for example, the gradient issue that we talked about here, we have created a secondary platform on Discord where we can go into more detail. We've got a number of members. I've posted the information on the forum. Please, you need to be a Discord member, but it's free if you don't have an account already. We'd love to move some of these deep dive. We can be it take a little more time to get into the nitty gritty of sorting out a challenge over there. And we can also match each other with the people who know the particular software platform you're working with and so on. So I encourage you to, if you're interested, to join our Discord channel as well.
I joined the Discord channel. I used it this morning, and I used their gallery, and I tried to upload a file, and it said there wasn't enough room.
You know
In other
what?
words,
Post a message on the Discord channel and we'll figure it out.
Okay, I made a folder. It's there already under my name. And like I said, when I tried to upload a photograph, it wouldn't take it. So
I don't think
okay,
that was on
Discord. I think that
of,
was on the Group IO platform that you did that. You did it in the TAA group's IO channel, not in the Discord channel. That Discord channel is a totally different thing.
Well, let me verify that. I'm online right now. So
Well, let's,
Right.
I know we're running out of time, so let's take that offline.
Okay,
All right.
thanks everybody for your attention. We'll see you next month on November the 18th. That's our third Monday of the month. And get those images submitted.
Well,
wow,
we'll be
look at
down to 1 month to go on the contest at that point.
Right.
I'm setting up my scope this week for the first time since the monsoons ended.
All
So
right.
look at
Good
that
luck, everybody.
anti-tail.
excited.
That anti-tail is
all.
awesome.